Hello and welcome to 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling trucks for 48 years, and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. Tom Caron along with Alex Speier. Not an emergency edition, not a live stream, drop everything Father's Night edition. This is just life going on without Rafael Devers. The shock of the trade now behind us. He has played a game with the Giants, two by the time this comes out. A couple of hits, standing ovations, big press conference with the entire organization was up on the podium. They had the longest table I'd ever seen for a podium. It was quite a show, Alex.
Sure was, starting with them, with the steam sprays while he's walking in with his little backpack. That was there was an interesting visual discrepancy there with the behind shot, yeah, this is you get a clear sense of exactly how badly the Giants wanted Rafael Devers and how excited they were to have landed them, and so it was interesting to certainly. The press conference was fascinating with how quickly he was saying, reaching conclusions about what his role could be with the Giants that he had not reached with the Boston Red Sox. It was pretty striking.
Fairly or unfairly, it just becomes a very dramatic discrepancy when you see the way he left Boston and the way he is welcomed with open arms in San Francisco, right? If you're a player sitting in Kansas City watching MLB Network and you've watched the coverage of him leaving Boston and how the lack of communication or the disagreement or the not being in alignment worked out there, and then you see this reception here. That's not a good look for the Red Sox right now for prospective players across the game, is it?
It can't be. Right, the fact that it reached a head where you end up trading a player who was clearly the best player in the deal, one who was the anchor of the middle of the Red Sox batting order. Other teams or other players around the league are certainly going to be taking notice of that and wondering, I don't know about you, Tom. My phone blew up in the minutes after the trade was happening, with a lot of people, wanting to know what is going on there. And that's never a good thing for an organization when that kind of thinking is erupting around both the way that an organization is conducting itself and the moves that it's making. Now, can that be handled? Can that be fixed with face-to-face meetings and the offer of money to players in free agency and the sharing of a vision? Sure. Right, like other players might have a different take on the situation, but at the very least, it's going to introduce a number of questions to players that they may or may not have had.
Been a lot of stories coming out about the Red Sox front office, the way they do business, the way they talk with scouts and analysts, and how that all comes together. It hasn't been flattering in the aftermath of the trade. How do the Red Sox rebuild their baseball front office image right now throughout the industry?
That is a really interesting question. I did think that it was important that Craig Breslow in the middle of the press conference said that he had to have a degree of humility about thinking how the situation got to this point with one of his most prominent players and rethink kind of his communication with other players. Tim Healy of the Globe has been out in Seattle. He had a conversation with Breslow about how he was trying to navigate conversations with players in the aftermath of the trade to make sure that he was available to them. But yeah, I think that there probably needs to be active measures taken in order they talked a lot about alignment, so there obviously needs to be some repair work to make sure that there are different ways in which a sense of alignment is very actively pursued at all levels of the organization, and that everyone feels like they are all part of the same organization trying to accomplish the same thing and understanding where and how each other is coming from.
I thought it was interesting, right? The two games played after the trade. Game one, Roman Anthony, in the first run scored of the post-Rafael Devers era, hits his first major league home run. You're like, all right, there it is. There's some of the offense that'll replace it. The next night they get shut out, and even though they've won 6 out of 7 at that point, they're scoring like 3.5, 3.6 runs a game. Right, the offense is down, and most of
Yeah.
that was with Rafael Devers here. But the high of that first day win, the Monday win, the low of an 8-0 loss the next night, I felt was pretty indicative of what's going to happen with a young team. There will be ups and downs. It will not be linear progress. There will be good runs and bad runs, and this is an even younger team today than it was on Saturday night.
Yeah, it had already been an up and down team, TC, as you and I have discussed all over the place. And that includes through this very rare winning streak, right? Like, that had been the first since 1972 in Major League Baseball, in which a team had won 6 straight games while scoring 4 runs or fewer in every game and winning by either 1 or 2 runs in every one of those games. That is a very narrow path to being successful. Now, if they're able to, if they're able to keep the pitching, the rotation in a place where like maybe Giolito and Bello have now had breakthroughs because they both have had they're parts of their pedigree that suggest both can be very good pitchers, then okay, maybe they're going to be building around a pitching first organization. They will need the starting pitching and the bullpen to be really, really good in order to be able to keep things on the rails because of the inconsistency that's going to be coming and that is going to be amplified by the absence of their best hitter.
All right, let's get to San Francisco. Rafael Devers spoke yesterday to the media. As I said, a couple dozen people up there with him. Not really. It was 6 people sitting at the podium. Barry Bonds in the front row watching. Peter Abraham was there. He's going to join us in a minute. But first, let's hear from Rafael Devers in his introductory press conference on 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers.
Now it's official. Mostly steer this, but time for questions. We have microphones, so we're going to deliver microphones around, and maybe you can introduce yourself into the microphone just for those watching at home, if you don't mind, Susan.
Hi, Rafael. Welcome to San Francisco. My name is Susan Slusser. I'm with the San Francisco Chronicle. How would you describe your day on Sunday and when you found out the news? What were your first impressions knowing you were coming to San Francisco?
Que si puedes describir cómo fue tu día el domingo cuando te enteraste que te iban a cambiar y cómo te has sentido ahorita que estás en San Francisco.
No, el domingo fue un día normal, acá que me dieron la noticia de que me iban a cambiar. No, lo tomé normal, soy una persona, vamos a decir, que toma la cosa como hombre y creo que me dieron la oportunidad de seguir jugando mi béisbol y vengo para acá de demostrar lo mejor de mí.
Well, Sunday was a normal day for me until I found out that I was traded, but obviously I took the news like a man, and I appreciate the fact that they traded me in order to give me an opportunity to continue playing baseball.
Oh, John's got a microphone.
John Shea, San Francisco Standard. Welcome to San Francisco, Rafael.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Why do you see the Giants as a good fit, and why did you no longer see the Red Sox as a good fit? Could you compare the two? Like, what went wrong there, and what is going to go right here?
Que si puedes comparar las dos organizaciones, si puedes compartir con ellos qué fue lo que pasó en Boston y qué es lo que puede pasar bien aquí con los Gigantes.
No, ya la organización de los Medias Rojas quedó en el pasado, soy un tipo que toma día a día y que pienso dar lo mejor de mí aquí y el motivo por que me trajeron aquí pienso que es ganar y soy un tipo que le gusta ganar y competir siempre.
I'm moving forward from the situation in Boston. Now I'm looking ahead with being a San Francisco Giant, and I think that I'm just going to compete.
Hi, Rafi. Welcome to San Francisco. Carlos Ramirez over here. Right here, NBC Sports Bay Area. You've only played 3 games here at Oracle. It's different, the dimensions, different weather from Boston. How do you think your offense will have to change, even your approach, playing here? Las dimensiones aquí son diferentes, Rafi. Bienvenido a San Francisco. Ha jugado nada más 3 veces acá. Es diferente a Boston, el clima y el parque. ¿Cómo crees que tu ofensiva o tu approach tiene que cambiar en este estadio?
Y es la misma pelota, no tengo que cambiar nada, el mismo béisbol y mismo dar lo mejor de mí.
it's the same baseball. You just play the same way, and like I said, I'm just here to give my 100%.
Hi, Rafael. Jose Bello, San Jose American News. Welcome to San Francisco. One of the big kind of questions for you is, there's a 5-time Gold Glover at third base already. He's not healthy right now, but once he returns, the matter of position. Have you talked to Buster and Bob about potentially playing first base? Do you see yourself more as a designated here? What were those conversations with the Giants brass like regarding your long-term position with this team?
Because yes,
Yo estoy aquí para ayudar al equipo en lo necesario, en lo que ellos quieran. Soy uno más del equipo y estoy disponible a dar el 100% de mí, donde me pongan. No tengo ningún pero, no tengo ninguna decisión. Solamente ellos son los jefes míos y juego donde me pongan.
I'm here to give my 100%. I don't put any buts. They're the men in charge. I am here to play wherever they want me to play.
Susan?
Do you have a preference though? Do you feel like you are best at a particular position?
No, como lo dije anteriormente, estoy dispuesto a donde me pongan, dar lo mejor de mí.
Like I said before, I am here to play wherever they want me to do and give up my best.
Buster mentioned, the possibility of leading this team to a World Series. What do you like about this team, knowing what you know about the personnel?
La bienvenida que me dieron lo dijo todo, me siento bastante alegre con la bienvenida que me dieron los compañeros, es algo que me motivó más todavía, me siento bastante motivado en este equipo, que ganar y todo el mundo me habla a mí de ganar y eso es algo que me gusta a mí ganar.
I love the role that I have about my teammates. I feel really good, that really motivates me, and everybody that I have talked to so far, they always talk about winning, so that's an added motivation for myself.
Sam?
Hey, Rafi, Sam Lubin, 95.7 The Game. I know all the Giants fans here are ecstatic to see you here, but there's a lot that was kind of reported in the last, couple days about kind of the end of your time in Boston, about how you were in the clubhouse or as a teammate. Are there any kind of misconceptions that have been said that you want to clear up about the end of your time in Boston?
No, ya como lo dije anteriormente, y eso quedó en el pasado, no soy muy sentimental en esa vuelta, creo que ya eso pasó y vamos a seguir adelante.
Like I said before, that's in the past. I'm moving forward. I really don't want to talk about it.
I really like his answers, by the way.
Peter Abraham of the Globe is in San Francisco. He was there for the entire thing yesterday. Peter, thanks for joining us. We just heard from Rafael Devers before the game. Went out and had a couple hits in the game, an RBI double, stranded on the base pass as they left the bases loaded in the ninth inning. What was the whole thing like? What was the mood? What was his mood? Take us there.
Well, I think the best way I can describe it, TC, is he came up in the first inning and he received a standing ovation from the crowd at Oracle Park. Had a pretty good at-bat and then struck out swinging. Then he got another ovation from the crowd at Oracle Park. And as I wrote in the Globe today, that doesn't happen in Boston. You don't get an ovation after you strike out. But that goes to show you how much they were happy to get Rafael Devers on their roster. They've been looking a long time to get a middle-of-the-order hitter for this lineup. It cost them a lot of money. It cost them 4 prospects, and they got the guy they wanted. And he got a hero's welcome in San Francisco. This was a major event in the city, to the point that the mayor came to the game and met Rafi before the game. And it was out of hand. It was very interesting.
We hear about change of scenery candidates all the time. So this is clearly a change of scenery when, based on what you're describing happening out by the Bay yesterday. As were you shocked to hear that Devers was so open-minded to whatever they want me to do, I'm going to do? Like, as someone who has seen this whole thing unfolding, the spring training, showing up and saying no about the possibility of not being a position player, to the to kind of calling out the Red Sox and saying, they went back on their word in approaching me about the position change. How surprising, if at all, did you find this whole dynamic?
Well, when I got to the press conference, the first thing that kind of struck me was they had a lot of seats there, that they were expecting a lot of people, and a lot of people showed up. And then Barry Bonds walks in and sits in the front row right in front of the podium. And then when the principals came out and Rafi's sitting right in the middle of the table and they start asking him questions, he's smiling. He's the happiest guy in the room. He's looking around. He's shaking hands with Buster Posey. He's shaking hands with Bob Melvin. And then right away, of course, the topic came up about where would he play for the Giants. And one of the first comments that he had was, "I'll play wherever you want me to play." And then he looked at Buster and Bob Melvin and said, "These are the guys in charge." And right then, you're like, talk about a change of scenery. This is the exact opposite of what he was like in Boston. And whatever happened on that flight from Boston to San Francisco, he's a much different guy now than he was then.
And we're hearing stories from coast to coast now. National baseball guys, local baseball guys, you guys, everybody, talking about what is happening in Boston. Pedro Martinez yesterday, right, saying that they're in danger of being one of the most hated franchises in the game by players. Is there an image problem within the player community with the Red Sox? I mean, when you see Rafael Devers scowling in Boston and everything being talked about, and then you see him smiling, saying, "I'll do whatever they ask," that doesn't reflect well on the Red Sox, does it?
Well, no, that doesn't. And then neither does when asked about it, what's going on. Mookie Betts said, "I don't care what's going on there," and basically shut down that line of questioning. So here's a guy who's a World Series champion in Boston who's so far divorced from what's going on there. He doesn't really care what's going on there. And I think that was kind of an interesting comment, too, that Mookie's had enough of the drama in Boston and hearing about it. He doesn't want to be asked about it anymore. And whether it's, Mookie or Xander Bogaerts, now Rafi Devers, when's the last prominent player to leave the Red Sox on good footing? It hasn't happened in a long time. I mean, maybe David Ortiz. I don't know. And I think that's probably what Pedro's speaking about, is that things don't end well with the Red Sox for their prominent players. And it's been like that for a while now.
Well, you had an opportunity to talk not just, to not only attend the Devers presser, but you were talking obviously to a lot of people around that. I believe that you had an opportunity, for instance, to talk to Nelson Montes de Oca, who is Devers' agent, who I had talked to early in the offseason, and kind of we asked the question back in November. So, the idea of a position change, has that been broached? And he said, Rafi is a third baseman. Very definitively at that point, and said that there had been no conversations with the team at that point. And in subsequent ones about third base. So what was the perspective of Devers' agent in terms of why this did represent a change of scenery and why there was an open-mindedness here?
Yeah, well, kind of two things that I thought were interesting. He made it a point to say that Devers did not ask for a trade, that he only said this might be what benefits both sides if there is a trade, but that he didn't demand a trade. So I think it's a fine line, but I think it's nonetheless still a line. And then the other thing he said was that he didn't know the exact timing of this, but he said the suggestion was made that Rafi would go to first base, but he wanted to stay at first base. He didn't want to play first base for the rest of the year and then go do something else the following year. He didn't want to be, in Nelson's words, jumping back and forth to different positions. But that never came to fruition. The trade was made before any of that could happen. So there does seem to have been some, maybe a light at the end of the tunnel, perhaps, that Rafi might have been a first baseman with the Red Sox, but at the same time they were negotiating with the Giants and other teams to trade him, and that never got to that point. And then, minutes before, he had sat on that podium and said, "Sure, I'll play first base. I'll do whatever you want me to do." So I don't think that it was necessarily he did not want to play first base as like a principle. I think it was more that he didn't like the way the Red Sox went about asking him to play first base.
Peter, I think most fans saw the press conference. It was 5:30 our time. Not many fans saw Devers after the game, but Lenny and I were on the air. The rest of New England was asleep. But you were there. What was the mood after? He'd been through a game. He'd gotten those ovations. He'd kind of taken a sigh of relief. What was Devers like after the game, and what was it like talking to him?
He was cracking jokes. He was smiling. He was in the middle of the room in the Giants clubhouse, surrounded by reporters, television cameras, print reporters, people from the team, teammates passing by. He looked tired, but he looked like he had been happy about, the way the game played out, other than the fact that they lost 3-2. He went 2 for 5, had a double, drove in a run, had some good at-bats. The crowd was on his side the whole time. Talked about his comfort with Willie Adames, who's one of the clubhouse leaders with the Giants. That meeting Willie, kind of got him through the day and knowing what he had to do around the Giants. Talked about his comfort with Bob Melvin, that he was going to be looking forward to the next 2 days and taking as many ground balls as he could at first base. And then one of the guys who covers the Giants said, "Is it possible that you could play first base against the Red Sox on Friday?" And he said, "All I know is I'm going to do everything I can to be as ready as fast as I can." So he didn't say that wasn't a possibility. He said, maybe I could. And it was just, you could tell he was very tired and he wanted to get, probably back to his hotel and get some sleep. But he smiled more TC yesterday than I had seen him smile the entire season going back to the start of spring training. Not even close.
There's a really interesting dynamic in play here because there have been varying assessments where, as the more time that passes from the trade, the more you see varying assessments. Like the first wave of feedback that I got on the day of the trade was, are the Red Sox not really pushing to compete in 2025? Questioning whether or not, questioning the wisdom of this trade, and then you've seen subsequent evaluations of, well, they did get rid of a contract that's likely to end poorly. They can redeploy the money, players like Harrison and Tibbs and for that matter, Hicks, right? Who will address an area of need because the Red Sox need more bullpen arms. There are people who have pointed to the logic of this, but from the Giants' perspective, the idea of taking on the money and giving up the prospects, what did Buster Posey and Zach Manation and other Giants officials have to say yesterday about why they were willing to say, yep, we'll take it all?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the last few years when they've been unable to find a middle of the order hitter. They felt like the thing that their team needed more than anything else was somebody to be in the middle of their order, driving runs, and kind of make the guys around them fit better in their lineup and to just make them a more potent offensive team, given what the Dodgers have done in their division, what the Padres have with their lineup, even with the Diamondbacks and some of their hitters. They just felt like they needed a more potent offensive team. And somebody in a pitcher's ballpark like Oracle Park could clear that fence and has power to the opposite field like Rafi does. They felt like he was a good fit. And I didn't get the impression that they particularly liked giving up some of the guys they gave up, especially Tibbs. They kept Bryce Eldridge, one of their first base prospects, their best prospect. I thought they feel like that was, they accomplished something in doing that. They didn't seem remotely concerned about the money. That was something Greg Johnson, the team chairman, was at the press conference. And when that came up, he basically dismissed it and said, this is a player that we needed, and whatever we had to do, this is what we had to do. And when Buster came to me with the proposal, there was no question about it. So I think after not getting Aaron Judge and not getting Giancarlo Stanton and not getting Shohei Ohtani, all of the different guys that they tried to get, they couldn't convince to come to San Francisco. They had an opportunity to basically make a guy come to San Francisco by trading for him, and they jumped on it. They weren't going to let it get by him.
And we've heard a lot about that part of it, right? That the Red Sox were able to get out from under the entire contract. And then the story's coming out that could there have been a better return had they eaten some of it? What have you both heard about that in the ensuing days here? About how much did they shop them? How much did they turn down, if anything, by not eating some of the contracts? Sort of take us through what you guys have heard.
Go ahead, Alex.
I'll start. Sure. They definitely had been in touch with other teams. As TC, as we had discussed, I had heard from another team that the Red Sox had been in touch with them within about a week of the trade happening, just to see whether or not there was a level of interest. So there definitely was a broader market outreach than just the Giants. And in terms of the money, I do think that there was a financial component to what happened here, insofar as the Giants were able to offload Jordan Hicks's contract, which they had signed Jordan Hicks. They had actually beaten out the Red Sox in the bidding for Jordan Hicks prior to the 2024 season. Those were the two teams that had identified Hicks as a potential starter, and so the Giants paid him as if he could be a kind of bargain level starter at 4 years and $40+ million. And then it turned out, nope, not so much a starter for the Giants. So I think that they were happy to. So it seemed, and Pete, you would have a much better feel for this on the Giants side than I do, that the Giants did get some measure of financial offset that I think maybe had to be a part of the deal. You would have a better sense than I.
Yeah, in talking to the Giants people, I think had they not included Hicks in the deal, the Red Sox would have sent some money back with Devers, not like $100 million, but I think probably that $30 million that they would have picked up for Hicks, that there would have been a financial component in the deal. But once the Red Sox took Hicks, there wasn't that financial part of it. So, but just the way that Buster Posey was talking yesterday, they would have found a way to do it. I think however it was going to work out, the Giants are going to find a way to make the deal. They weren't going to let another guy who they felt fit at their park get away. And especially, I think they understood the dynamics about Devers, that he's not a vocal leader. He's not a guy who's going to rally the clubhouse. They feel like they have the guys like that on their roster already, and that all he has to do is show up and hit. They don't need him to be the face of the franchise guy. They don't need for him to be the guy who speaks to the media when they lose 5 in a row, or is a guy who's going to be guiding prospects or anything like that. They just want him to play. They have the other guys in their clubhouse. Mike Yastrzemski is one of them. They've got a bunch of different guys who they feel like are the leaders, and that Devers could just do what Devers does.
I do want to ask Pete, I'm curious for your perspective on this. Is the remainder of Devers' deal a bad deal to be absorbing? He's 28 years old. It's 8.5 years, roughly $254 million that the Giants are and end up paying, right? I think that the industry views the Vlad Guerrero $500 million deal as being an overpay. Nonetheless, one that at least one team was willing to pay. The Giants had been willing to go to the $700 million lengths on Shohei. They had been willing to go to. They had been involved in Bryce Harper. Back in the day, they had been involved, as you pointed out, with a number of high-profile misses. Where are we on what? Let's assume that Devers is a first baseman DH, mostly DH, for the remaining 8.5 years of that deal. Is that a bad contract or no?
Well, if he's mostly a DH, it's certainly not a good contract. Now, if he does embrace playing first base and he can play first base, it's a less bad contract. I think the last 5 years of that deal probably aren't going to look real great. But on the other hand, you look at what teams are paying for hitters now. You mentioned Vladdy Jr. This deal's probably going to be a lot better than that one. In terms of what you're going to end up paying, the Giants are going to pay, I think, $254 million. That's roughly what the number is going to be. That's a lot cheaper than what somebody else would cost in free agency, just by looking at what teams are paying for offense now. And I think they look at this not certainly as a bargain, but a better option than trying to go back on the free agent market and get that guy.
All right, guys, like much of New England, I had an eye on the Red Sox last night while I was watching Rafael Devers go 2 for 5 on one monitor and Brad Marchand lift the cup on the other monitor. Okay, I don't care about San Francisco. I don't care about Florida. Let's talk about the Red Sox, and let's talk about Boston. You guys touched on it before, right? So many of their superstars are gone now, and it didn't end well. And you can list them, and they go on and on, right? Whether Xander Bogaerts was a good play by not getting on that deal, it didn't end well for Bogaerts. It didn't end well for Betts. It didn't end well for Sale. It hasn't ended well for Devers. What does that mean to the Boston Red Sox future? We know they got a guy like Alex Bregman to come in and say, I'm here because it's a winning team and it's a winning culture and I want to be part of that. That was refreshing because we haven't heard a free agent come in and say that in a while, right? A high-level, high-profile free agent. How much of a blow is this whole Devers thing to their efforts to be that franchise again, a destination for the top players in the game?
Well, I mean, it's another brick in that wall, right, TC? It's another thing, another prominent player that it went bad with. And Bregman is a very smart guy when it comes to saying all the right things. He's also what's on essentially a one-year contract. He could be gone as soon as the World Series is over. And I think if at very least he's going to go back out into the market, if he, unless the Red Sox blow him away with an extension before then. Now, he could certainly come back to the Red Sox once he goes out in the market, but to me, I don't think there's much question that he will, even with this injury. Unless he has like a terrible end of the season, I would imagine he's going to be a free agent again. So I think the Red Sox have a lot of issues with player relations. How did they get to a point where Mookie felt like, that's it? Nobody could put an arm around Mookie and say, hey, you're a partner in this. We're going to move forward together and build a great team. They didn't have how did they not understand that they could have made Bogaerts a better offer in spring training that year and kept him and not let him get into the market where everything went crazy? Now, is that a bad contract for the Padres? Absolutely. But the Red Sox could have had a reasonable contract that they acted earlier. Same thing that happened with John Lester back in 2014. There's just, for whatever reason, they don't seem to have the ability to get on the same page with their star players. Happens once, okay, maybe that's an anomaly. Happens twice, it's happened all the time. They've got to somehow figure out a way when they have these great players to pull them in and not let it get to this point where it ends badly.
And you do wonder whether or not they're going to have to start being more liberal and giving out no trade clauses in long-term contract negotiations, because every one of these deals has ended with the player being traded, save for Dustin Pedroia, right? That one was brought to fulfillment. JD Drew made it all the way to the finish line. So did Daisuke Matsuzaka. But the fact that I'm putting those guys out kind of in jest, but also kind of not, because it does highlight the fact that, like, when you think about deals of 5+ years, the duration between those deals actually finishing along expected lines. JD Martinez, I should raise him as an example of a contract that did end up being fulfilled and concluded in Boston. But there are those. At the very least, there's a pretty good division between those guys who sign long-term deals and finish them up in Boston versus those who get shipped out before the end of those deals.
And JD was a mercenary, right? I mean, JD goes to wherever he goes and he hits, and then he goes to the next place. JD wasn't, he's not going to be looked back upon in 10 years as a beloved Red Sox, right? He was the guy who helped them at the time when they needed the help.
Not exactly Orlando Cabrera with the
right. He's not going to be walking out, coming out from behind the flag at Fenway Park one day for a ceremony. Oh, there's JD Martinez. He's not Trent Nixon, but these other guys, are those levels of guys. And it just, to see Xander in a Padres uniform and to see Mookie in a Dodgers uniform, and I don't know, to me, it's just, it should never have gotten to the point with those guys. Now, Devers is not, I don't think, the same personality as those players, but still a guy who helped you win a World Series when he was 20 years old. A guy, I don't know, to me, it shouldn't have come to this point where all of this ugliness and he's basically putting it in their face yesterday going, sure, I'll do whatever you like me to do. I'll play out, I'll pitch, I'll play the outfield, I'll do whatever you want. And it's a bad look. It's a really bad look.
I want to ask you guys this, and Peter, I'll start with you. We talk about, and Craig Breslow himself has said, I've been thinking a lot about the communication process with Devers over the past 2 years, right? And you mentioned Bogarts before, getting a deal done with him before it ever got to the end. And I think we all, Mookie Betts, was there a time 3 years into his time to get that deal done? Lester, we know there was a chance to get a deal done. Like so much of this, at the end, I think in each of those cases, you can totally understand the move. I can understand the Rafael Devers move today because of where things were. Right? If they asked him to play first base and he was showing no interest and he's the highest paid player in franchise history, that's not the example they want to set for the young guys. But how did it get to this? And I bring this up because now you've got this generational crop of young players matriculating up. Most of them are here. Have they learned enough to take care of business with these guys in the next couple of years so that in 4 years we're not saying, well, I understand why they traded Roman Anthony because it had gotten to the point, right? Like, I feel like you're at the point now where you have to make sure these mistakes aren't repeated 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road.
Well, I'm sure that they would say we've done that with Christian Campbell, right? That's what they'll point to, that we were able to make this deal with Christian Campbell, which for the moment doesn't look great, but they have faith that it's going to work out. I don't think this is a GM level thing, TC. I think this is an ownership level thing, that if you see a player as somebody you want to be part of your future for a long time, it's somebody on that level who needs to put their arm around that guy and say, hey, we're going to go into the future together. This is, you're going to be a big part of this. You're going to be the guy who, 20 years from now, you're still going to be part of the family. Even when you're retired, you'll be like David and you'll be like Dustin, and, that's how it'll be. And they haven't been able to do that with the latest crop of guys. And to me, that's a shame, because some of those players accomplished great things in Boston. And 10, 15, 20 years from now, they're not going to be remembered as Red Sox, like Mookie. And to me, that's the shame of this all, is that guys who did tremendous things, that it's not going to be looked back that way when they're in Cooperstown or when they're done with their careers. And that's the part that the Red Sox need to get a handle on, that when you have a special player, you've got to figure out a way to make it work.
There are unique things that come with the Boston environment. I think that those actually are typically selling points when players are in free agents. Like, players like to be pursued and have the opportunity to consider the Red Sox. So there is an opportunity to right the ship here. I realize that there probably should be questions on the part of any player who's thinking about a long-term deal with the Red Sox about this pattern, but it does require. So they have this asset, right? Like, they have the opportunity to sell the Boston experience, the Fenway experience, the passion of the fan base, and players. Like Juan Soto talked when he was in town to Jen McCaffrey of The Athletic about the fact that he thought that what the Red Sox were putting on the table was extremely enticing, and he was very impressed by what they were pitching. Obviously, the same was true of Bregman. So there's an opportunity to fix it, but I think it does require, it does require, Pete, that kind of notion of a partnership that you're raising up, where there is more ongoing connectedness with the players about building the future together.
Like, I don't know what Roman Anthony wants, right? What is Roman, does he see himself just as a baseball player? Does he see himself as somebody who's gonna, wants to be involved in a community, wants to, do different things like Mookie's done? I don't know that yet. I don't know what Marcelo's, goals are as a person or as a player. But somebody with the Red Sox needs to find out what those are and say, hey, what is it you want to do beyond the field? How can we help you achieve your goals? And work with those kind of. If you think those guys are as good as they're supposedly going to be, then this needs to start now. This can't start a year before free agency. They need to start doing this stuff now.
I will say that, like, with that group in particular, there's been they have actually. I actually give the Red Sox credit because, and those players credit, because they started the whole duck boats conversation as they were going through the minors. So they've already started to build a collective identity about what it means for them to be members of the Boston Red Sox and to create a collective goal as the foundation of that. But you're absolutely right that they have to continue to build on that and to kind of reinforce the messaging that, yep, you guys are the ones who are going to be driving them.
I will say this. I bet you none of them thought they would be the first players on their team to win one with the Red Sox, that there would be at least one guy left who had won it all, but he's gone. I'll ask you this finally, and we'll move on. But there is, of course, the conspiracy theory that all of this was just a way for them to get out of the contract. They don't want to spend the money. So I want to ask you simply, Peter, you first. If Rafael Devers had played first base 4 weeks ago, would he still be with the Boston Red Sox?
But that's a good one, TC. And I think if you take the clubhouse stuff that they've talked about into consideration, I don't know that it would have mattered. His attitude was a lot different yesterday than it was a couple days ago in Boston. I think that was what drove the trade. I think it came to that point. That's what drove the trade more than the first base stuff.
I think the first base stuff was kind of a signal of I think if he had made the compromise of playing first base, even if it was reluctantly, I think he still would have been a member of the Red Sox. I do think that they at least would have been able to massage it through to the trade deadline and possibly the offseason and possibly a lot deeper into the contract. But that the intransigence of just the hard no on the defensive question made it such an awkward position that they found it untenable.
As opposed to the no from earlier in spring training about DH,
which he backed off
guys,
of.
Peter, I know. Yeah,
the good old days, as we call it in Boston. Yeah.
The good old days when he didn't want to be the DH. Peter, it's been a crazy couple of days. You getting out there, and it's going to be a crazy weekend with the Red Sox there. Thanks for carving out a little time. We appreciate the visit.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Guys, we're going to shift here and talk about the return a little bit. First, let's hear from Kyle Harrison. Alex, you were there last night in Worcester at Polar Park, and he spoke to the media a little bit, a guy who was getting ready to make a start for the Giants when he got traded. Now back in AAA, working on some things. Here's Kyle Harrison on 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers.
How'd you characterize the past 48 hours for you?
Probably crazy, just crazy. But, at the end of the day, it's baseball. That's the way I'm looking at it, and just excited to be here. That's it.
How do you process being part of a deal for a player like Rafael Devers? How does that sit with you?
Yeah, probably still haven't processed it yet, to be honest. Just like I said, I'm looking at it, taking it day by day, and happy I'm here, and I'm looking to get settled in here and see where it takes me. So obviously a player of that magnitude I've watched honestly growing up, so it's kind of cool to see. But no, just speaks to how much they believe in the package in return. So no, we're just excited to go out there and show these people what I can do.
Digging in more on the 48 hours question, how do you stay in the park on Sunday night? Are you like, I'm out?
I was out. I was like, all right, now I got to figure out what to do, pack up my stuff in San Francisco, get out of that apartment, get out of that lease, and now I'm all here. So now we got to figure out where to live here, and it's a whole whirlwind of events, but no, I'm thankful and happy for it.
And so flew out here this morning and then drove out,
this morning 7:10 flight, and I got here about 20 minutes before game time, and was able to watch a great ball game. Got the dub.
Can you describe your day of travel? We heard that your flight was a little bit delayed. You got here and unpacked. What was it like for you getting here today?
Yeah, haven't unpacked yet. That's for later tonight. So probably going to a hotel tonight. So try to get some shut eye. But no, I just showed up here and got to be able to throw during the bullpen in games. So they put me on the jumbotron. So that was kind of cool. But no, it's baseball at the end of the day, and I'm excited to be here.
Got your first experience with Boston traffic too.
That's right. I was sitting in 2 hours of it. That was great.
You're one of us now.
That's right.
What was it like, coming in here, greeting these guys? What was it like meeting some of your new teammates here?
It was weird experience for sure. Restarting kind of is the way I'd say it. Kind of setting over and fresh slate, and that's the way I'm looking at it. And great organization, great people here, and just so thankful for the opportunity, and let's go do it.
So you are expressing a great deal of positivity, and obviously they do believe in you when they're saying, okay, we're trading you Rafael Devers, we're bringing back Kyle. At the same time, you're in AAA now, right? Was that a hard thing to kind of accept and absorb as part of this?
Honestly, not really. I know it may sound weird, but it's baseball. Like I said, I'm trying to normalize it more and more, but I've been in AAA a decent amount of time in my life now, and it's not about where I want to be today. It's about where I want to be 5-10 years from now, and where I see myself getting better. And I think this is a place that I'm going to get better and develop, and I'm just excited for the opportunity.
What do you want to focus on in terms of that development? Obviously the fastball, you're able to compete against big league hitters as a starter, throwing that 65% of the time. Where do you see the rest of the what needs to happen in terms of the growth of the rest of the arsenal?
Yeah, I think it's just messing with another pitch. Whether it's adding something else or tinkering with a sinker or a gyro slider, and I'm just excited for the opportunity and what we're going to be experimenting here, and just learning how to pitch. I think it'll open my eyes, and this is a great organization for it, and but it starts there, I think, with the pitch arsenal, and just seeing what we can do with it.
How exciting was it that you were going to, Andrew Bailey, to be able to, it can be jarring to change organizations.
Yeah.
How helpful was it? I assume you've already had a conversation with him.
For sure, yeah. Talked with him on the way over, and it's always cool to have a familiar face. And he's been nothing but great to me with my time in San Francisco. And no, man, he's stoked to have me, and I'm stoked to have him there. And it's going to be awesome.
You said that you had got a really nice welcome from the guys here. Have you had conversations with any of the guys on the big league team? Was there anyone that you have a previous relationship with that you're kind of excited to get up there and play with? Yeah,
no, I haven't had any conversations with them. It's kind of new for me. I'm a West Coast kid, so this is all new to me, East Coast. And no, I just hope they welcome me with open arms, and I'm going to do everything I can to win them over.
We did see a photo as you were leaving, a hug with, I'm not sure who it was exactly, I saw it quickly, but as you close that chapter, what did those relationships, what did that experience mean to you over on the West Coast as you come over here? Yeah,
it's cool. I think just looking back to sum it up, it's honestly, just where I kind of grew up. I got drafted out of there, as a 18-year-old, getting drafted out of high school. I'm grateful they took that opportunity on me, and just looking back on it, kind of crazy that chapter's closing, but another one opens, and I'm just so excited to have this opportunity here. And but that's it. I think it was just kind of that nostalgic of hometown team drafts you, but on to bigger and better things now.
Who are the people in the Red Sox organization? Obviously you talked to Andrew Bailey, and you're getting to know some people here. Anyone else you talked to, whether Breslow or Alex, anyone else you talked to thus far?
Not right now at the moment. I talked with Breslow a little bit here and there, and I had a great conversation with him. Actually worked out with Crochet a couple, I want to say a year and a half ago, over in Arizona, because that's where I live in the off season. So we worked over at Push together, so I've got to know him a little bit. But yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting those guys and getting to know them.
So obviously, as much as this trade has been about Rafael Devers leaving the Red Sox, there is an important consideration about who they were getting back. Kyle Harrison, really interesting to hear his thoughts about his openness to kind of tweaking the arsenal, because we know that he has the super electric fastball that gives him a really interesting anchor, but he does need to build out that arsenal in order to be a successful major league starter. The Red Sox think that is a winnable bet, that there is a path for him to be a mid-rotation or better starter. Craig Breslow in the conference call in the presser described him as, a front half of the rotation guy. We heard similar things from Andrew Bailey, from Justin Willard, suggesting that they view him as being upper half of the rotation potential. So now it's kind of a collaboration between Kyle Harrison, whose demeanor was incredible, considering he got optioned. He was upbeat about being traded from the Giants to the Red Sox and said, I see this as a great growth opportunity, even though he ended up being sent down from, he was going to be making a Sunday night baseball start against the Dodgers in Dodger Stadium. And all of a sudden, he's stepping on a mound in Worcester in order to throw a couple of balls just to kind of loosen his arm back up while he's trying to figure out his schedule here. But his attitude was fantastic on first impression, and now we see where it goes. But Harrison, Hicks, there are components to how these guys could be important for the 2025 Red Sox as well.
Hicks is a guy they were interested in a couple years ago as a starter. It hasn't really worked as a starter, at least not in San Francisco. Is he a guy now? And again, he threw 105.1 miles an hour once. This is a guy who can throw a fastball. Is he ticketed for a very short-term appearance coming soon to the bullpen of the Red Sox?
Yeah, it feels like they don't anticipate him being out for too long, given that it's essentially a toe bruise that has been sidelining him. And the Red Sox need more. They need more options in the bullpen. The group that they've had has done an extraordinary job of being able, especially there was that one pocket in May where things went off the rails over and over. They've stabilized, and they've been a really important part of their success recently, but they're all going to get kind of run into the ground as we've started to see with a guy like Brennan Bernardino. And so being able to add a guy like Hicks, who does have clear late innings stuff, has a chance to be pretty significant for them. We'll see exactly when the return date is and what he looks like upon that return. But adding bullpen arms is probably something they were going to be trying to accomplish at the trade deadline anyway.
The other two, James Tibbs III and Jose Bello, low minors, obviously a bit of a crapshoot there. But, Tibbs was one of the top prospects in the Giants organization, first-round draft pick, two-time ACC hitter of the year, player of the year. He's not hitting right now. He's a hit-first guy who's not hitting right now in the low minors. But this was a guy who everybody thought was a real big prospect a couple years ago.
Yeah, well, coming out in the draft, he was viewed as a high probability guy to be a good offensive player. And I think that that's limited to a corner bat profile, right? Like either he's a corner outfielder for now, maybe there's a first base experiment there somewhere in the future, because the Red Sox are in a pretty good spot with regards to their outfielders. But Tibbs is someone who should be a big league hitter. Now, where exactly, I think that the scouting consensus is more that it's closer to an average level player. Someone brought up the name Michael Conforto type, who is maybe a platoon corner contributor or an everyday regular, but not necessarily the aircraft carrier in the middle of the lineup, but a valuable guy and someone who either has a chance to be a contributor for the Red Sox or who could be part of trade conversations later, because the Red Sox, as we've talked about many times this year, have a lot of outfield depth.
And most of it's left-handed hitting. They just need to go get a right-handed hitting guy at some point. That's my wish. Okay, we're doing. All right, there's a lot to unpack. Good stuff this week. We thank Peter Abraham for joining us. Alex, as always, we thank you. And we will do it again soon.
I'm sure we will, Tom.
I won't be here this weekend. I'm golfing. All right, I am going to be competing for God and Country in the Drive 4 Kids Celebrity Challenge. The goal is to not be last. I was second to last last year. I accomplished my goal.
Fantastic.
So third to last would show improvement this year. That is the goal.
We'll be rooting for you to clear that ambitious bar, TC. But we believe in you. We believe in you.
Thank you. Golfing with Jim Rice and Keith Folk in the first round, so they will have some stories. Alex Speier, we appreciate it. I'm Tom Caron. We'll see you next time on 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers. Thanks for checking us out.